Welcome to Styled Clean, from toxins to truth, one thread at a time, where we press pause on fast fashion and pull back the curtain on what's really stitched into our clothes. This is the podcast where we go behind the seams, follow the threads to their source, and rediscover fashion as an act of environmental stewardship. Hosted by Kathleen Audette, stylist and image consultant. This show is for people who believe their clothing is more than fabric. It's a living story that touches your spirit, your body, your mind, and your values. Styled Clean is where fashion meets stewardship. If you're ready to cultivate a wardrobe that honors your values and an ethical closet, you're in the right place. Now, let's unravel today's episode.
Today, my guest is Rachel Jordan, a marine biologist with a master's degree in marine biology and ecology from James Cook University. She has studied coral reefs around the world. She is also the author of If the Ocean Has a Soul, where she weaves together underwater discoveries with biblical truth. It's a book I highly recommend. A self-described, Jesus-loving coral nerd, she brings together science and faith in a way that feels both grounded and deeply hopeful. Rachel helps people see that caring for creation and knowing the Creator are not separate callings. Today, we step into Rachel's world beneath the surface, and we trace how ocean-based textiles make their way into our everyday wardrobes. We'll also uncover what a marine biologist actually wears when she's in the water all day. Here's my guest, Rachel Jordan. Welcome to the podcast, Rachel Jordan.
Thank you so much for having me, Kathleen. I'm excited to chat all things marine life and fashion with you today.
Yeah, it's kind of a really interesting connection, huh? Those two things.
Yeah, but they are connected, and we're going to talk about it today.
Yeah, we are. Yeah. So I'm going to ask you my first question, which is, you are a marine biologist, so you are in the sciences, and you are a Christian. Tell us a little bit about what led you to be a marine biologist, and then how you're able to bridge that gap between science and scripture that we often experience as Christians.
Oh, yes. So I am really blessed in that I grew up in a Christian home, and I can't remember a time in my life when I didn't know who Jesus was. That's really special. And so my faith grew up with me. And especially as I was entering high school, started asking a lot of deeper science related questions. I was taking biology and chemistry classes and learning about larger scientific concepts like evolution and the Big Bang and genetics. And naturally, some of that, as I was trying to make sense of it in light of what I read in scripture, I felt like some of it just didn't fit. You read in Genesis chapter 1 about how God created all things. And if you take it literally, it sounds as though he made it in 7 24-hour periods of time, or rather 6, and then rested on the 7th. And that just didn't fit with the cosmology that comes about from understanding the origins of life when you're looking at it scientifically, apart from scripture.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started to really wrestle with some of these big questions, and I carried that with me into Bible college, which I went to for about a year after high school. And then I carried those questions with me again into my undergraduate degree at Seattle Pacific. And as I was studying science, as God was leading me towards coral science specifically, these incredible reef building organisms that exist on our planet, as I was trying to understand my field of study, I kept wrestling with these questions of how science fits with scripture. And I encountered a lot of really great resources, some of whom were given to me by Jesus-loving professors who also subscribe to science. Some I found along the way. And now I'm in a really special position of getting to create resources for other people. And this is partly what motivated why I wrote If the Ocean Has a Soul, my book that came out this last year.
Which is
So
fabulous, by the way. I listen.
Thank you.
I love it.
Thank you. That's so kind. So faith and science conversations are now really at the heart of what I do and what I love to talk about. And I get a lot of messages from people who are actively working through these questions, some for the first time with a level of seriousness. And I just want to say like a couple things about that.
Please.
If this is something you're navigating, the intersection of faith and science and how you fit,
Hmm.
especially when it comes to how the world was made, when we're talking about creationism and what science tells us about how the world came to exist, I want to give you some encouragement. I want to give you some tips if that's something your listeners are open to receiving. And the first is to remember that the truth is true no matter what. How we feel, how scared we are by the questions we're asking, our apprehension about what it might mean for our identity or the future, the concern we might have for our own well being or the well being of our planet, all of those things are valid feelings to have. It's normal to be scared going into big questions and having doubts, but God is with you in that. And just because you have a feeling doesn't mean the truth has changed. God's character is the same yesterday, today, and forever. And he promises that he is with us. He goes with us into and through deep waters. He's never going to leave or forsake us. So if you believe that God is the realest, most actual truth you will ever encounter, and if science as a study is the pursuit of truth, then science, in its most purest form, is going to inevitably point us towards God and the world that he's created. For me, it is a discipline that's allowed my faith to grow. And so I want to encourage people if they're struggling with faith and science questions, first of all, God's with you. Second of all, you're not the only one asking those scary questions. And also, it's okay to be scared, but I'd encourage you to keep moving forward in community with other people, but also pressing into Jesus and knowing that he's the same and he loves you. And that doesn't change just because your perception of how things work might. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yes. It's such an interesting intersection when you say there's the truth and science is designed for us to lead us to the truth. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I think that's, we're looking for the truth, and he is the truth. God is the truth. Scripture is the truth. And so why would they not intersect? Why would they not meet at this one place?
Yeah,
But
that is the thing they have in common, but the questions they ask to get there are different. Like,
different. Okay.
I like to use the example that science tries to tell us, like science tells us how things are the way that they are, but faith, religion, tells us why things are the way that they are. So science and any sort of philosophy, religion, faith are fundamentally different, but they are at their core both ways of getting to know the truth.
Okay. Well
Yeah.
put.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, yeah. And can you tell us just a little bit for people that have not read your book yet about your discovery of the ocean in your work and the corals and how that brought you to a closer relationship with God and just this awareness of the truth and how real it is. Because it's so prevalent in the book and it's so poetic the way you see things that I just wonder if you could touch on that for a minute.
I can try to. For me, I experience God most clearly, most vividly when I'm outside, when I'm out in creation. I see the clearest portrayal of the creator's character. And
Hmm.
so for me, with coral reef specifically, from a very young age, God put this passion in me to understand coral reefs. Corals are this incredible animal that looks like a rock, functions like a plant, but it's a community organism and it's an animal, and they're so incredibly diverse. There's only one species of humans on our planet right now, but there are over 6,000 species of corals, and
Wow.
we're constantly discovering new corals. They're very cool organisms. They create habitat, support ecosystems that more than 25% of all creatures in the ocean come to rely on. Their coral reefs, the habitats that corals build, support humans in so many diverse ways. They're coastal protection against storms, They're a source of pharmaceutical compounds for medical innovations. They are a food source for a lot of coastal communities. A lot of people rely directly on coral reefs for what they eat, and also tourism. The net value of coral reefs, it's staggering, and I feel like the number is constantly increasing. But if I remember correctly, coral reefs worldwide are worth upwards of $11 trillion annually. So each year, coral reefs around the world bring in a net worth of $11 trillion. It's insane.
That's
So
crazy.
corals are valuable not just on an ecological level, not just scientifically, not just economically, not just socially, but I also believe spiritually, because God has infused everything that He's made with hints and glints of His character. And so for me, one of the ways that I have learned about God is through my work, spending time working with corals, mostly in the wild, and learning more about who God is by the things that I see evident in His creation.
Right. I'm not. So when you, in your book, you talk about being in the Florida Keys, right? The area where you watched the coral die. And it was, by the time I was done listening to that, was so sad. I was thinking, we don't understand it the same way we don't understand our own suffering about things that happen to us. I mean, that's happening to us. You were seeing it happen, right?
Yeah,
And
I
just,
was witness to the collapse of an entire underwater ecosystem, a collapse that happened within about a year span of
yeah,
time. And that's hard. It's hard enough dealing with our own suffering, but to then see suffering among animals, especially animals that, from a Christian perspective, I would argue, are not sinful. They haven't done anything wrong. They
mhm,
don't deserve what's happened to them. And depending on how you interpret scripture theologically, you might even say that their suffering is due to humans. It's our fault. And from a scientific perspective, that is certainly the case because of the impact humans have had on our planet and the way that that has contributed to coral reef decline worldwide, not just in Florida. But my work experience is primarily based around Florida reefs because, like you said, I was working as the coral biologist of Dry Tortugas National Park down in the Florida Keys, which is an incredibly gorgeous, special place. If you ever get the chance to go, I highly recommend it. It's only accessible by seaplane or by ferry. There's no grocery store on the island. There's no cars. You get to walk around a Civil War era fort. The park itself is about 100 square miles, 99 of which are water. So if you have a boat to get out there, that's even better because that's the majority of the park is water. And
wow.
I hope you're a swimmer because you're gonna want to get into the water, that beautiful, crystal clear Florida blue Gatorade colored water. It's so pretty, and there's so many incredible creatures there. Hermit crabs scuttling along the beach in groups, hanging out, just giant schools of amberjacks swirling around. And yes, even still the corals. There's been a massive decline in the coral cover, the amount of the seafloor that is covered by reef, but there are still corals present, and it's really an incredible ecosystem to witness.
That's really interesting. Was as you were describing that, I'm thinking I grew up on Cape Cod and it wasn't like that. It wasn't the beautiful coral sea. It was a little more murky and more northern ocean looking, right? And
It's a different
I
kind of beautiful. Yeah.
different kind of beautiful. I loved it. I still love it. And you were talking about sharks, your fear of sharks.
Oh, yes.
Shark story. I was I lived just a couple towns over from where they filmed Jaws.
Wow.
We I never saw a shark in north where I lived, but only recently. Recently they have shown up
Mm.
there. But something you said about the coral reef dying, like I think especially if you grew up on the water or you are attracted to the water or you know that there's something in you that loves the ocean, you're going to look for that beauty no matter where you are, no matter if you're on the East Coast, West Coast. I've been on the West Coast in the water, swimming down in California and looking at things, and it's completely different than Cape Cod, which is different than Florida where I swim. But it doesn't matter because you have that. God created it and you're just looking at something amazing, and the idea that we somehow were able to destroy that by what we
Mm.
do is just heartbreaking. I mean, it's the reason I do the work I do, because I see everyone has to wear clothes, but we're not responsible for thinking about where they came from and what was destroyed in the process. And so there is this level of there's suffering going on in the world because of what we've done. And then there's our own, like, sort of, we did this like collective guilt. But there was something in your book I wanted to touch on because I think it's important for people to hear, especially when it comes to Christianity and all of the other different reverberating voices around what is suffering. And in a time when it seems like our world is suffering and things are so crazy, in your book, you talk about suffering because you talk about watching the coral reef die off. And in my work, I watch the confusion and the breakdown of cultures that work to produce our clothes
Mm.
and the suffering that the people on the earth endure. And I think a lot of us look for reasons for this suffering. And you talk about it in your book. At one point, you mention the work of Dr. Marilyn McCord Adams, speaking in Dr. Keller's book. And she says, Christianity doesn't by any means condone suffering as a fact of life or a necessary evil. Christianity treats suffering differently from all other philosophies. The Stoics said, accept suffering. The Epicureans said, avoid suffering. The ascetics and the masochists said, embrace suffering for its own sake. But the gospel, the Bible, does not accept suffering. It doesn't avoid suffering. It doesn't embrace suffering. It engulfs suffering. And that Christianity offers a perspective of past, present, and future reality that can't be achieved by any other philosophy because the Christian gospel contains a promised blessing that overrides, usurps, and transcends all present pain. Could you just speak to that for a few minutes, that idea?
Yeah, I mean, that's the gospel, right? Like, God made the world originally good. And we know that the world we see right now, it's messed up. Things aren't the way that they're supposed to be. We don't want things to be this way. There's too much hardship and pain and toil and the problem of suffering, it's a reciprocal issue because the people who suffer don't necessarily seem like they deserve it, and the people who don't suffer doesn't seem like they deserve that goodness. And we wrestle with these questions. It's
Yeah.
the problem of suffering. And I don't want to slap a band-aid on that because it's hard. And it's okay to wrestle with that interaction of your place on the planet and how God is integrated into all of this. But the gospel, the good news, is that if Christianity is true, which I believe it is, then, like I said before, God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. But more specifically, that even though God made the world good, it is now messed up. We now experience suffering. God is actively, through even us, imperfect people in an imperfect world, God is actively making all things new again. He has a promise to redeem and restore all things. And we see this as a tremendous cosmic redemption story spanning from throughout the whole Bible, from Genesis to Revelation and beyond, of what God has always been and is continuing to do through creation. God created a beautiful planet and placed all these incredible biodiverse creatures here, including us. And humans were given a special role within that context of creation to tend and to keep, to serve and protect the rest of the created order. And we have failed. in so many ways with that. But there are also examples of ways in which we are actively living out that calling. For me as a coral biologist, I view my job to serve and protect coral reefs. That is part of my calling, both as a scientist who cares for our planet and as a Christian who believes that God is at work through people to redeem and restore the world. And Jesus is the penultimate, he's the ultimate example of this because he came, lived, died, rose, and is coming again to redeem and restore all things. So we can experience the redemption now as human beings in the world. The restoration, that's an active thing. That's a thing that I think is still coming. But it is promised, not just to
Yes.
humans, to the whole world. There's some incredible imagery when you compare Genesis and Revelation side by side. So Genesis, the beginning of our world in the recorded story of the Bible, and Revelation, the not the end, because everything would continue on in Revelation, but the end of the recorded story of that then leads into forever. And the ecological picture that both of these books, almost like bookends, create is that Revelation is a beautiful reflection of Genesis, back to when things are good, but restored, and if anything, even more beautiful than they ever were in the beginning because of the story of God's redemption and restoration that he's worked. Revelation paints a picture of God's kingdom that is not us floating in the clouds as ephemeral forms with halos and harps and cherubim, and it's
Right.
not that. It's not what you picture in, maybe the storybook you read as a kid. You read Revelation and there is imagery of water and forests, a garden, much like what you read about in Genesis, very Edenic. There are animals, potentially, creatures, certainly,
Yes.
all different kinds of spiritual forms, diversity. There's diversity to the kingdom of God. Every tribe, tongue, nation, species. I'm projecting a little bit here, but I'm curious. I don't think the end all be all is going to be as sterilized as we tend to imagine it. I think it's going to be a highly integrated ecological system that we humans participate in. And all of creation, then, as well as I believe now, will be living in praise of God. We'll be actively worshiping him.
Yeah.
And we have opportunities. If you're a Christian, like you have an opportunity to, in your life, be actively praising God with how you live. I think
Yes.
sometimes non-human creatures do that better now in the broken state of our world than we often do. But by the time we reach the story in Revelation, God's promised kingdom is fully restored. We'll all be doing that together in unison, every creature. And
Right.
that is such a beautiful promise to cling to for me when I look around at the brokenness of the world, when I witness coral disease, when I witness animal suffering, when I see a creature lose its home due to habitat destruction, when I notice the increasingly warming temperatures of the waters in the Florida Keys, or just whatever the degradation is that I'm seeing, I also know that I have an opportunity to participate in the world now to try to make it better, to try to bring about God's kingdom come. His will
Yeah.
be done on earth as it is in heaven. God is actively bringing his kingdom to earth, but
Yes.
also, regardless of what happens now, God's promise still stands. That is
Yes.
still a truth that I can rest upon. He is still himself in giving himself to us in all of creation. And that is the best news, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. It's the thing that gets you, for me, it's the thing that gets me up in the morning is that promise of what's to come and the fact that I am working on something that I think is important in his world. Like there's this idea in Judaism called tikkun olam, which loosely translates to repair the world. And I think the whole idea that we've had about heaven is that you're just going to die and go up into heaven and be an angel like the the gospel according to Bed Bath and Beyond, some sort of little angel or something, right? And it's just not true, right? It says he's coming back to this world. He's coming down and restoring things. And that promise of restoration and repair is something that we participate in right now. Like, what are we
Mm,
doing right now? What are we in? You're doing it in spades. And just the idea that we have the privilege of doing it. That's how I feel, is that I have the privilege of participating in his world and making it better in some way, some small way, whatever it is we're supposed to do. I just cling to that too. I cling to that promise of what's to come, and the idea that, hey, there's work to be done. So like when I'm working with
so
clients, I'm
good.
like, let's get your clothes figured out so you can get up, get dressed, and get on with what you're supposed to do. Right?
That's so
There's
good.
things to
Yes.
do. Yeah. I think that segues really easily into, like, the idea that there's stuff going on in the world of, fibers and fabrics for people that they're starting to come from the ocean. Things are coming from the ocean in a good way,
So
right?
cool. Like the
Yeah.
technology is
Yes.
incredible what they're doing with textiles these days, pulling algae from places that perhaps the algae shouldn't be growing. Like it's environmentally not a good thing, but they pull it out and then they can use that as a resource to create fabrics and all kinds of things.
Yeah, and you probably know more than I do. I've been studying as much as I can, or trying to find even articles or news things about these fibers and dyes and stuff when the companies will talk about them. They keep a lot of things under wraps, I've decided, and that's not a bad thing. But most people don't associate the ocean with the clothes in their closet, right? But
Hmm.
there are these innovations using seaweed and algae, and they're being made into fibers and dyes and inks, like some of the most beautiful colors, shoe materials, even some couture garments were on the runway.
Yes, the images are honestly, I think they're stunning. Looks so pretty. Mermaid chic.
Yeah. Who would have thought that a few years ago? And then I had this one too, that some companies are developing biodegradable yarns from kelp, and that could actually replace some textiles, which would be great. So, like, the ocean could end up in our sweater drawer, right? It could end up in
Very
our
much so.
closet. And this is exciting for you. How is it exciting for you? And how effective can fashion be, do you think, as a tool for ocean awareness and conservation? So going the other way.
Mm. So I think this is a really cool time to be a marine scientist because even through fashion, it's bringing more public awareness.
Yeah.
Like, yes, there's the avant-garde things that, get the big photo spreads and you see in the
Mhm.
news, but just the idea that you could go online and buy yourself a t-shirt made from algae. That's that's wild. And I will admit, like there are limitations to this too.
Mhm.
The technology for this is still fairly new, and it's not scalable yet. So most of the companies that I've looked into that are using these methods, it's smaller batches, and
Yes.
because of the amount of effort that goes into making these materials, oftentimes the prices are quite high. I was looking at a t-shirt the other day, and I think the cheapest price I saw for a piece of like algae-based clothing that was 100% biodegradable. It was $150. But it's also very cool that this is an option that we have that is available now, that we can do things like this. Also, the composition of some of the pieces that are being made, they're like, not to nerd out too hard over the
They're the
chemistry
nerds.
behind
Yes.
some of this. Because I definitely want to get to your question and make sure I answer it
I know.
adequately, but I think it's fascinating because it seems like my understanding is that there's primarily two ways in which these marine plants, things like algae and seagrasses, are being used to create textiles. Or rather, there's really three ways. You take algae pretty much in all these processes. You take it, you dry it out, you blend it up into a powder, and then you can mix that with a synthetic material.
Mm-hmm.
So the result is you have something that is not entirely biodegradable. It's not as sustainable, dare I say. The second option would be you do the same process of creating that algae powder, but then you blend it with something very organic, something like wood pulp. So you might have yarn made that is, 80% wood pulp, but 20% algae based. And that is incredibly cool. And then the third option would be where it is entirely algae based. And one of the methods that deviates from the creating that algae powder that I was describing, where you collect the algae, you dry it out, you blend it up, you create a powder, and then you mix it with things. One of the other methods is to like not put too high a level of detail on it. They essentially turn the algae into a mixture, and then they chemically extract from that these stringy pieces that they're able to then weave into threads and textile. And
Wow.
that is incredibly fascinating to me. Like the organic chemistry behind this whole process, so cool.
Yes.
And the intersection of like, I'm just really curious to see how it develops, especially as people are curious if demand for it increases, as we learn more about how to effectively harvest algae in a way that's good for the environment and then use that to create clothing. It's all very cool concepts. But to address your question, I want to make sure I hit this right. You asked specifically, how is fashion pushing forward concepts in marine science? Or
How effective can fashion be as a tool for ocean awareness and conservation?
yeah, well, I think first and foremost, like it's a conversation starter, right? Like, okay, example. I'm wearing these shell earrings. These are from a very small business called Spiral Sisters. I found the creator on Instagram, started following her a while back, and finally got a piece of my very own. And I love, so what I love about these earrings is that the gal who creates them, her name's Jessica, she goes out and does these very small collections. She'll collect like a handful of very specific shells, and then she creates them into small batches of jewelry that she then puts up for sale. And this is her business, but she does it in a very sustainable way. She's not going out, and this is not like a mega corporation collecting, you know, billions of shells and raking them in and turning them up. It's a very different process. And what I love about these earrings is that I've only had them for maybe a week, and I've worn them 2 or 3 times, and the number of conversations that have sparked because of these earrings. I've been in coffee shops chatting with friends, and strangers will come up to me and say, "My gosh, I love your earrings. Where did you get them?" And suddenly there is an avenue for me to talk about my marine science work, because I can say, I am a marine biologist, and I was wanting to find a small business that promotes ocean work and is like sustainable and like small local type of business. And I was able to find this person who creates these beautiful earrings. And like that is such a cool thing that fashion gives us. It's a tangible touching point that creates conversations, social avenues to be able to share information about science and about people doing scientific endeavors. And I love that. So I think it's a huge awareness building tool. It's also, in other instances, like supporting the algae textiles, for example, fashion is also a way in which we can bid with our dollars, right? So there's this remarkable quote. I feel terrible that I cannot remember who says it originally, but the quote goes something like, every time you spend $1, you're casting a vote for the kind of world that you want. And I think recognizing your spending power over your wardrobe, because we all wear clothes, most of us anyways, we wear clothes, or we buy, pretty decorations for ourselves to showcase our personalities, our interests, whatever. But you're also casting a vote for the kind of world that you want. So by choosing to spend your dollar on something that is helpful rather than hurtful for the environment, you are casting a vote in that direction. And so I think that kind of awareness is also really great as well. And that's a way that fashion can actively make a difference for the underwater world and for marine science, is to find ways through fashion to support scientists, support the new technologies that are sustainable, do the research to understand where your clothing comes from, and make informed decisions based on that. Recognize that there are alternative options. I recently learned about fish leather. Historically, it was considered, by the Western world, it was considered poor man's leather. Back historically, indigenous cultures, particularly in places like Canada, for example, that was a clothing source for them. And they were harvesting the fish anyways because they needed that for food. So it was a way of using the whole animal. And fish leather is becoming, I hear marine biologists, hearing about fashion through the grapevine. I hear that it's becoming increasingly popular, especially with luxury brands who are turning away from traditional leather sources for vegan options. But
Right.
in the case of fish specifically, fisheries are an ongoing thing, and the amount of waste from raising up fish in order to eat them for food, the amount of waste associated with that is tremendous. And so by starting to look into something like fish leather, you are
Mhm.
now taking a waste product that's going to exist anyways, and you
Right.
are using it. This is a more sustainable and circular way of using the world, and using, almost like respecting the fish. Like, if you're going to use the fish, use the whole fish.
Mhm.
And so there's all these different examples of ways that I see an intersection between fashion and marine science, beyond just awareness and beyond just the economy. But, you get to vote for the kind of world that you want on a very fundamental level when you choose to spend money on your clothing.
Yeah, there is this responsibility we have, I think, anytime we spend money, that what's behind it, what's behind what we're buying, like
Mm,
from our food, particularly, and then now our clothes. We're thinking more about who made them, where were they made, what are they made from? And when it comes to something like fish leather, you can be opposed to leather, but vegan leather is a petroleum-based product, and
oh,
petroleum
that's an
actually comes
excellent
from
point.
the earth. But but it's still an oil-based product. To be able to go to fish leather seems like a responsible decision, once they get the smell out, of course. But I'm just sitting thinking the process through and going to investigate that. And anybody you mentioned today, or I mentioned, I'll make sure we link to them in the show notes, because we've talked about previously together, we just talked a little bit about your own choices about what you wear or what you wore in the field when you were working in the ocean. So
How do I
how
make
does how do
decisions?
you yeah, how does your personal expression about who you are and what you love show up in the clothing that you choose now, or even the gear that you choose or chose previously when you were working in the ocean? Tell us a little
Yes.
bit about that.
So some of it's just comes down to practicality. I'm a very practical person, and I certainly prioritize comfort
Yeah.
over all else. If it's not usable, I'm not going
Mhm.
to use it. And then it's just sitting around, wasting away. So I am very intentional with buying things that I know I'm going to use. And especially when it comes to diving gear. So
Yeah.
my job as a marine biologist, I've had the opportunity to go diving. And previously, when I worked for the National Park Service, diving was a very large portion of my job. I went diving 4 to 7 times per day. And
Wow.
because so the human body temperature at like when you're healthy is about 90 Fahrenheit. And Florida water, for example, where I was doing the majority of my diving, is in the hot season. In the summer, at the surface, it's about like 80 degrees on a warm, warm day. But that is still 18 degrees below your core body temperature. And so the
Right.
second you get in that water and you're spending time in it, you are losing body heat. And that's totally fine if you're primarily on the surface, if you're in the sun, if you're able to get out of the water, if you start getting shivers. But when you are on a working dive as a professional scuba diver, you are at depth. So you are down further in the ocean where the water is getting colder. And you are down there for a fairly long period of time. You're down for anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour, 15, hour and a half, depending on how quickly you use your gas that you're breathing as a diver. And so you are losing heat from the surrounding water, being a different temperature than your body. You're also losing energy because you're working. You are swimming.
Yeah.
You are, in my case, I was oftentimes treating corals that were sick with the disease. So I'm wielding tools. I'm holding a caulk tube and I'm putting medicine on the corals. I'm carrying heavy gear, oftentimes like masonry nails and hammers. If I was doing restoration work, sometimes you're hauling milk crates filled with materials, or you're tagging corals, putting cattle tags onto specific corals and collecting data on data sheets. So you're juggling a lot of gear. You're working. It's physical labor, mental labor too, and you're losing body heat. So all this to say, it's really important to stay warm.
Yeah.
And so I take my choice of wetsuits very seriously. And the thing about a wetsuit or a dry suit
Hmm.
is that they're primarily made of neoprene, which is a synthetic rubber that is completely different than the kind of rubber that you would collect from a rubber tree. Neoprene is made in a laboratory, and it is incredibly durable. It's very weather resistant. It lasts a long time, and it is very insulating. And so it is, as a marine biologist, the best possible choice for the kind of work that I do in order for me to stay safe and healthy and do my job to the best of my ability. That
Right.
being said, I always say this to my coworkers, we're going to wear our wetsuits into the ground. Like, you buy a wetsuit and you wear it until it is falling off of your body because it doesn't degrade. I
Mm.
was doing some reading up on the origins of neoprene. It's only been around for about 100 years, still a fairly new material, but it doesn't break down. It is so effective at remaining consistent in structure over time that they actually use neoprene to line the inside of landfills because it's weather resistant and it prevents the leaching of chemicals from trash seeping into the surrounding environment. It's a way to insulate the landfill, you might say. And
Wow.
so if you're going to make the decision to buy neoprene, which in my case, I kind of have to. It's the best option for the work that I do. I'm a big fan of, wear that wetsuit until you can't anymore. Make sure that the wetsuit you buy fits your body really well because you're going to be living in it for a long time. And pick one that's made really well, that has really strong seams and is very comfortable and plenty thick for the kind of work that you're doing, because you should wear it a long time. So neoprene is a big staple of my working wardrobe, but there are other like, at the end of the day, at the end of a dive day, what I really want to do is, like, strip off my wetsuit. It's all,
Hmm.
feels gross after being in salt water all day. And I just want to put on something light and breathable and soft because you've been in salt water all day long. And I'm a big fan of just a good old cotton shirt
Hmm.
and some just comfortable pants. Um, I learned about a legging brand that I've become a huge fan of
Hmm.
called Waterlust. You and I have
Yeah.
chatted about them a bit. And something I love about this particular brand is that their leggings are made of recycled materials. So
Hmm.
it's material that already exists in the world. They're just adapting it and turning it into a really buttery, soft, comfortable legging. But they're also taking a portion of their profits as a company and supporting marine science work. So you can buy their sea turtle leggings and it supports sea turtle research, or you can buy their whale shark, swimming top, and that supports whale shark research. The brand is founded by marine biologists who have taken photos from their own work and then
Hmm.
adapted those photos into prints that have gone on their leggings and on the other items that they sell, their other merchandise. So that's a brand that I really love to support. And there's several other really great, almost like science gear type
Mhm.
brands that you could wear even if you're not a scientist, just because they're fun and they're comfortable and they're good
Yeah.
products. But there are a number of recycled brands that use recycling to create their materials that I think put out some really great science gear. But Waterlust is, I love wearing their leggings and their swim tops under my wetsuit so that I have sun protection when I'm on the boat, and then I put on a clean set of everything when I get back to the field station at the end of the day. So
Yeah.
that's another thing. Also to incorporate, like, that's from the very practical level,
Yeah.
and talking about neoprene, talking about the recycled materials. But the other layer to your question is the aspect of personal, what my wardrobe communicates about who I am. And that's hard as a marine
Yeah.
scientist because you don't go into the field going, I'm going to communicate to the world who I am today. You're going out there to do the work, and you want to do it safely. So maximum coverage, big fan of that. And it's not like neoprene typically comes in a lot of fun colors. Like you typically get black.
Black. I was gonna say that, yeah.
Yes,
And
like
looking at all these gorgeous colors in the ocean and thinking, what do you think?
yes.
Can I wear that? Like,
Yeah, and that is something I love about the brand Waterlust is they do bright colors. And
they
so there
do. And
are different
gorgeous.
avenues for that. But for me, another layer to it, like the personal expression, yes, I want, like, ideally, you get a wetsuit that like has some cute like pink or blue panels on the rib cage or like on the cuffs. Like you do what you can. Um, but for me, it's always been about the practical accessories that I would use anyways. So
Mhm.
because I have long hair, it's really normal for my hair to get trapped in my dive mask.
Mm.
And you go to take your mask off or adjust it, and it can rip out your hair. And so one of the accessories that I always dive with is a buff, just like a loose, stretchy band of material that I wear around my neck when I'm out of the water. And when I'm
Mhm.
about to go diving, I pull it up over my head like a headband, and it
Okay.
shoves all my hair back out of my face
Protects it.
and protects it. For like really good, strong hair ties, those
Mhm.
come in fun colors. So having some really good, colorful, long lasting in the saltwater hair ties that I can tie my hair back, and then I've got the fun, colorful buff. Like I might be in all black with the wetsuit and the gloves and the dive boots, but I can also choose fun colored fins. Sometimes that's a safety strategy too. Like it's better to
Okay.
have really bright colored dive fins underwater so that your dive buddy can see you in low
Mhm.
visibility. So having, bright orange, hot pink, vibrant green gear or white underwater, those are really great visible colors.
Yeah.
So I'm a big fan of anything that's bright where you can get it for underwater gear. But those are some of my favorites.
Yeah. That's fascinating because I think about your story in your book where you sink into the sand but you have your dive buddy there who has to come pull you out.
Yeah.
Listening to the book, we had to make a stop, and I'm like, "I have to get back to find out if she gets out of sand." I mean, I know you got out, but I'm like, "How you got out?" But just the idea that the colors are something that helps,
Yeah,
something
it's like, and again, that goes back to
interesting.
practicality. Like it's good for
Mhm.
safety things, but it's
Yeah,
also, a way to express your
yeah,
personality too. So it can be both.
internally. Yeah, yeah. Because when you were describing that dive where you were going deep into the sort of black hole and there's no light, like at a certain level, there's no light and the coral, anything there turns
Yeah,
like
the
a
maze dive site.
fascinate all the color stuff. I was fascinated. I'm like, oh, I have to get online and study this because color is such a demanding design element for people. It's,
Mm,
out of line and shape and proportion and um, pattern and all that. Color is the most demanding. So the fact that we can use it in what you're doing is fascinating, and that, like, I sent Waterlust pieces to some clients that are in the water all the time, that travel, that go to the ocean and love the ocean, and one of their comments was, "Look at these patterns. I've never seen this kind of pattern before."
It's
And I
all
said,
inspired by sea creatures.
that's because they take it from the ocean and put it on the fabrics. I just think all that's fascinating and really cool that that's happening and that we're moving in a direction where we can take something from the ocean and create something so beautiful as well. And I will link to that company that makes the bracelets too, because I think that's
Oh,
really,
yeah, For Ocean.
yeah,
Yeah, so
yeah.
they take the thing I love about 4Ocean is that they remove a pound of trash from the ocean for every bracelet that they sell. And the bracelet itself, I believe, is made of recycled plastic that
Hmm.
was collected from the ocean. So it's a very cool, simple, affordable way of supporting ocean care while also getting a really cute bracelet to go with it. There's a similar company, I believe it's called Follow, Fahlo. I just recently learned about these. These are wildlife tracking bracelets, but these aren't the bracelets that go on the wildlife. They're bracelets that you can buy. Super cute, very colorful and fashionable, neat accessory. But every bracelet that you buy supports a nonprofit that is actively working in wildlife conservation.
Wow.
And each bracelet, depending on the one that you buy, it has the tracking information for a live animal out there in the world that this nonprofit is caring for. So, for example, there's a orca bracelet that you can buy that when you scan with your phone the code that comes with the bracelet, you're able to see where that orca is out in the world in real time.
That's so cool.
Yes, so if you're a wildlife lover, this is an incredible way to just be more conscientious about like where wildlife is and what their patterns are, and but it's also through fashion. Well,
Hmm.
this is through a company that has an item that you can wear, and then it's a daily reminder of that animal that's existing out in the world. I learned about this company, and again, this is where like awareness comes in through
Right.
fashion. I was at a dinner event for my husband's job, and I was chatting with one of his coworkers who I noticed was wearing this super cool bracelet that had a I think it was a whale shark, if I'm remembering correctly. And I asked about it because again, I'm a marine biologist. I'm like, okay, you have a whale shark bracelet. What's going on? And he pulled out his phone and showed me where the whale shark was at that moment. We chatted about it. He also had a sea turtle bracelet, and so we got to see where the sea turtle was and things like that are they're really great ways to care for marine science that are also doable, and you get something out of it too by having the fashionable item. So that's neat.
Right. It's like your earrings. People ask you questions and you're able to talk about it and have some hope when things feel overwhelming, right? Oh, in your book, you talk about fashion in one sense, a little bit. You touch on the temple of God, the
Yeah.
Solomon's temple, the first temple, um, and how uh, the priests in there were dressed a specific way and were told to dress a specific way. So it's
Mhm.
not like how we dress doesn't matter. Um, I mean, Jesus says, don't worry about your clothes. Don't worry about what you're wearing. Don't worry about what you're going to eat. But he doesn't say don't care because God cares about these things. It's just how he cares, why he cares. And so fashion has been part of, I think, the Bible since the beginning. I mean, there's,
Well, in the garden, yeah, God made the first clothing out of animals for Adam and Eve
mhm,
after he talked with them about what had happened when they ate from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. So
mhm.
that's a very good point. Like clothing very much is present throughout the whole Bible, but it's also, yeah, it's present in how we think about the temple and preparation for the temple and the purity, the pursuit of purity and the ritualistic ways in which clothing was incorporated into that in the Old Testament.
Right, because there's a lot of attributes that we can imitate or reflect, I guess is a better word, about God. And, his kindness, his mercy, his love. But I think the one thing that we don't necessarily reflect, we just want to become is his holiness. And in so many ways, we can do that with how we're dressed by deciding that we are a representation of him, and we are a reflection of him back out into the world. And so we need to think about how we do that and what we look like and what we're saying to people, that there is this responsibility about what we're wearing that's deeper than just, fashion for the sake of fashion, or
Mhm.
because, it was on a runway somewhere. There's a lot more to it than just fashion for the sake of fashion.
Really, that really connects back to that verse that you mentioned in Matthew, I believe, when he's talking to his disciples about why they shouldn't worry. And the main takeaway is that God's going to take care of you. Like, look at the birds of the field. They don't
Mhm.
store up food in barns, and yet God feeds them. And look at the lilies of the field. They're dressed splendidly,
Mhm.
but they don't labor or spin or make their clothes, but God cares for them. And how much more then will God take care of you and provide food and clothing when you need it? And I think it circles back to what you were just saying in the sense that, like, every time we get dressed, perhaps we should ask ourselves the question, is this what God would provide for me? Am I dressing purely for the sake of practicality for my job, or purely for the sake of personal expression, or purely for the sake of I want this kind of attention, or I want to make this kind of impression? Maybe instead the actual thing we should be focusing on as Christians anyways is this the clothing? Is this the accessory? Is this the style that God would provide for me, that he
Mhm.
would put me in? Is this a reflection of the beauty that he's made, not just me and my physicality, but also the objects with which I dress my body and
Mhm.
the way in which those objects, those items reflect God's character? That is, so as a marine scientist, modesty has been a big part of the conversation because I do spend a lot of my time in the water. And so coverage is something that is talked about. And most of the time it's talked about in the context of, you know, cover up because it's easier than putting on sunscreen because you don't want to get sunburned, you don't want to get skin cancer. So it's safety gear to cover your body. That's just a smart move to make. But there's also conversations, especially among women in marine science, about modesty or erring on the side of being very covered, wearing a one piece maybe instead of a two piece, covering more skin covered because it's a simple, I hate to say this, but it is a simple and effective way to perhaps garner more respect, especially when you are a young woman working in historically a very male dominated field.
Sure.
So modesty is a conversation physically has come up a lot in my career as a marine scientist when I'm talking with other women. And there is something very freeing about when you remember that modesty is also a posture of the heart, of
Yes.
it's not just about the way in
What?
which I dress, it's also about how I am internally as I'm getting dressed. And I think keeping that perspective of, is God really at the center of everything that I do in my life, which he should be if I am claiming to be a follower of him as a
Mhm.
Christian? And asking that question of, in the Garden of Eden, God made the first clothes and gave them to his people. So are the clothes that I'm wearing something that God would choose to give me? And maybe that's something I could invite him into in conversation with a little bit more than I currently do. So I love
Mhm.
that insight that you had.
Yeah. Yeah, I love what you just said. And I have a chapter in my book that I'm writing on modesty, and it's been one of the harder ones to write in terms
Oh,
of
I bet.
our society and how it views even that word, modesty,
Yes. It's kind of a dirty word.
right? Right?
Yep.
But the way that scripture uses that word, has that word, interprets that word, it's absolutely beautiful. And when we can sink into that and it comes from the inside out, it's a different feel. It doesn't have any of the sort of tentacles that modesty
Mhm.
has right now. And so I look forward to talking about that more. But when I bring that up to people, it definitely has a negative connotation. And yet, if you are reading scripture, it comes up a lot. So, Rachel, when issues like fast fashion or coral reef decline feel overwhelming, how do you encourage people to stay hopeful and believe that their actions still matter?
Well, I think in the brilliant words of the late, great Jane Goodall, I would say, do your bit. You have power to change your little sphere of the world, so change it. And try not to become too preoccupied by what the person next to you is or isn't doing. Like, you stay faithful to what you are convicted and compelled to do. You do the very best that you can and encourage and inspire other people to do the same. But do your bit, do it well. And if you're a Christian, remember that you have the greatest hope. Regardless of what happens within our lifetimes, whether things get better or worse, or a bit better, a bit worse in different capacities, we have so much assurance in knowing the end to the story. We know the cosmic redemption and restoration story that God is working over all of creation. And so we can find hope in Jesus if in nothing else.
Mm-hmm.
I also want to highlight that we have some reasons to have scientific hopes as well, because there are innovations, new technologies, new areas of learning and avenues for restoration that we're seeing unfold, like the development of algae into textiles, like
Yeah.
coral reef restoration that's happening in the Florida Keys, like all different kinds of environmental endeavors that are making a difference for our planet. So there are reasons for scientific hope as well. So hold both at the same time. It's okay to have the grief and the sorrow and the heaviness of seeing hardship and suffering in the world, but do not give it a seat on the throne of your heart. Do not give in to despair. Cling to the hope. Remember the ultimate hope in Jesus. Remember the scientific hopes and do your bit.
That's beautiful. And you've brought it full circle from where we started. So
I'm
thank
glad.
you. Yeah, that's great. Thank you for being with me. I appreciate you. And I am so excited for our next conversation.
It's been my pleasure. It's been so lovely chatting with you, Kathleen. Thank you for having me on Styled Clean.
This week, I invite you to follow the thread, literally. Choose 3 pieces from your closet and read the fiber labels. Cotton, polyester, wool, blends. Ask yourself what those fibers required. What soil, what chemicals, what animals, what labor. You don't have to overhaul your wardrobe overnight. Just begin noticing, because stewardship starts with attention. If this episode resonated with you, follow or subscribe to Style Clean, because style isn't just what you wear, it's what you stand for.